Is Age of Sigmar better than Warhammer 40,000? That's what we're going to explore in this vlog. And what I find interesting is I'm constantly being tempted by Age of Sigmar. And I'm starting to ask myself, I'm in a dangerous place right now. I'm in a dangerous place for two reasons. First reason is, for the first time in a long time, and I'm being fully transparent, I'm being completely honest with you guys, I've got everything painted. I've got everything painted. All of my 40K stuff painted. My Battletech Catalyst plastics painted. I've painted up Conan. Painted. Ready to go. My chain of command, World War II, late war Germans. How many more tanks do I need? Painted. I'm actually done. So now, and that's not like I've got that pile of plastic or stuff that's hidden that I've forgotten about, but I still remember, but I feel guilty about it. Everything is painted. So I'm like, this is a dangerous place to be because I'm ready to jump in. Even my Hex City Battletech terrain, painted, ready to go. I can't remember the last time this happened. So that's the first duality. The second duality is the Age of Sigmar community. Here in New York, it's taken a number of years to grow, but it's now at the point where it's very intriguing. It's very interesting. There's a good player base, a solid player base, where you could make some friends. You could show up for pickup games. They're organizing certain campaigns and mini events, and there's some amazing, amazing terrain. And I could argue, it's not just a question of feeling. Some people think certain models look better, but Games Workshop is, I believe, approve or disapprove, agree or disagree, Games Workshop has shown more love for the Age of Sigmar terrain and sets than they have for 40K. And there's some really, really beautiful sets. That's before we even pull in the old Storm of Magic stuff and other Long Live the Old World Warhammer Fantasy sets. Age of Sigmar here locally is an interesting place. So that has me looking at the rules, looking at the source books, looking at the different model ranges and factions, and thinking like, do I want to jump in? And I've been following it for a little while, and I'm going to exercise some impulse control if I do jump in and really figure out like, what the heck do I want to do with this? And that got me to thinking the question to today's vlog, and we're going to then turn it over into the comments. I feel like and it's so hard to say this because I love 40K. I love 40K. I think Age of Sigmar is in a better place, and I think it's better than 40K. And I think Games Workshop is slowly realizing that and building that, and Age of Sigmar gets more love. Well, the question is, why does it get more love than 40K? And maybe this is just my perception, but being a Warhammer 40,000 player and going into the specialist games back in the day or the standalone games, Blackstone Fortress, I was always on the 40K side. Warhammer Fantasy at the time, it was existed here and there, but generally speaking, my local meta was 40K. So I'm a little bit biased in that I've experienced the Games Workshop hobby completely through 40K. Side note, I've got a massive goblin army. I just actually pulled it out the other day and was thinking about rebasing it for Age of Sigmar and having just a goblin lulz army. The old school wolf riders. I've got goblin knights. I've got the siege engines. I've got tons and tons and tons of squig riders and netters and fanatics. And I saw some bases that were like mushroom fungus bases, and I was thinking about ordering up like 100. And literally all I have to do is paint them and pop them off. And I'm like, ready to go for the lulz. So even jumping in on that, and those models look fantastic, but looking at the new kits for Sigmar, they just, Khorne is calling to me, the glory of Khorne. So my thought on this, Games Workshop destroyed the old world. Put aside feelings of that for a moment. When they rebooted to Age of Sigmar, two things happened. They got to wipe clean the rules. They got to carry over a few things. They explored some things. It's still a Games Workshop game, but they got to break free from that. Now, did they do that effectively? Did they take advantage of that? I'd have to kind of defer to Age of Sigmar players. But with 40K, what we've seen in the current edition of 40K, they dropped some things, they changed some things, certainly. But 40K is still 40K. It's like I'm pulling out my Windows machine, and the kernel, the Genesis, the DNA under there is still like, Windows 95. Something's running. Some process is running that. If we see, I could pull out Rogue Trader right now. I've got my old Rogue Trader Warhammer book held together with like rubber bands and tape and just everything. You could read through that book, and there's some things where you'd be like, minor heroes, major heroes, and points are off and weird war gear and stats. But I bet you could play that game as is, and you would understand that no problem as a 40K enthusiast, and you'd get like 90% of the rules correct. That's how little 40K has changed. It hasn't grown. It hasn't evolved. And I'm not saying it should, because there's something to be said about a familiar game. But Games Workshop is locked in where it's like, look, we got to keep churning out books. We got to get these guys to buy those $60 books and buy. We don't have time to change the rules because that would force us to, not that there is balance, rebalance things. We're going to stay on the course. We're going to make some minor adjustments so we can get more plastic on the table. Sigmar, I feel like they really got to, as much as Games Workshop looks at anything, build that up. The second aspect is you could still use your old toys. And some of the kits from Warhammer Fantasy, they look pretty good, but Age of Sigmar is committed to redoing all these kits, and they look fantastic. I mean, they really do with the visuals. I see so many units, I don't even know what the heck they do, but I'm like, that looks awesome. 40K is kind of this duality of Space Marines get the new love, essentially now it's Primaris, and other armies have gotten a little bit of love and updates like Necrons, but there's still a ton of models that are just the old models. And to replace them all, does Games Workshop, I don't think Games Workshop is looking and saying all of these older kits from the entire range of 40K, if we relaunch them, there's going to be mass outrage and no one's going to rebuy. So if you have these type of armies, no one's going to rebuy. I don't think they're looking at that. I think they're just saying people buy Space Marines. We don't really care about anybody else. The secret sauce is Space Marines sell. So we're just going to jack Space Marines everywhere. What they have shown, I mean, I remember back in the day, so to speak, when it was like 40K, a new army is releasing. And we were like, wait, what? A new 40K army? A new 40K faction? From the unknown, and it's not Space Marines, more Space Marines. And when they released Tau, that like dudes couldn't believe that. It was so futuristic looking, and Tau, an amazing army. Now Tau still look really, really good, but for the time that was like unheard of. The model visuals. When we got Mechanicus, when Mechanicus dropped, that was like crazy for the visuals also. And the Mechanicus models, Forge World always looked sexy. Forge World was always beast, but you paid for it for Forge World prices. And I remember sweating over some of that Mechanicus and especially some of the tank models. For Forge World, the Mechanicus line in mass-produced plastics has now brought that into 40K. So Games Workshop is capable of doing it, but I also feel like now Space Marines, a.k.a. Space Romans, a.k.a. Romans in Space, you can only do so much before you lose the look of the Space Marines. Now, Primaris have changed some things. You get a new mark of armor. Guys can debate back and forth. But look, it's still a Space Marine. I feel with Age of Sigmar, the reinvention of all the different factions, just by the fact that it's fantasy, there's no kind of mass-produced military standard. You get away with a lot of different things that you can create. And also, we touched on this in a video from last week, this idea that Games Workshop, as it's evolved, they realized, like, hey, terrain kits are important. You're fighting over this battlefield. And back in the day, we're cutting stuff out of the pink foam. We're using cardboard. We're making stuff out of plaster and bits. And some of it looked absolutely fantastic. absolutely fantastic. But Games Workshop realized, I get you to buy your army, your friend buys their army, and now if we get you to buy terrain on top of it, we saw this with, back in the day, the Cities of Death book that got released, releasing the Imperial terrain and the Manufactorum sector terrain. That was huge. Now we got the pipe terrain and other aspects of Hive Cities. Looks fantastic. But when Age of Sigmar got that reboot, I just feel like they gave a lot more love to the terrain. And because they didn't have stuff already in existence, it was cost effective and profitable to create more. So I just feel like they can do so much more and have done so much more with Age of Sigmar. Will it replace 40K? Will it get to the point where things switch? And we're not even, people are like, aren't there like players that play like Lord of the Rings? Is that still like a GW thing at somewhere, playing that game? And I mean that totally in jest. Absolutely. It's an important part of Games Workshop. But Lord of the Rings is very, very focused. It's always been, hey, 40K is the thing. Grimdark is the thing. Like, are we looking in another 5 to 10 years, which is a long time, but not that long of a time given the scope and how Games Workshop is releasing things? Will we get to the point where, like, Age of Sigmar is the main thing? Age of Sigmar is what it's known. And it's like, yeah, there's those guys that play that 40K thing. I don't know. The Emperor came back. Something happened. Who the heck knows? Chaos is at it again. But Age of Sigmar is where it's at. And I just feel like the direction that they're taking that is much more potent and much more forceful than 40K. Your thoughts on that, your opinion on that, and just out of curiosity, are you a 40K player? Are you an Age of Sigmar player? Do you play both? And what do you see? What do you see as that momentum moving ahead?